And welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a woman seems to feel like she's in the wrong body. So, are you having an identity crisis? Because I was supposed to be someone else.
Not too long ago, a friend set me up with a blind date. A handsome guy, but he probably spent more time on his hair than I did. He seemed pleasant enough, so I introduced myself and sat down next to him. He laughed and shook his head.
I pictured you differently.
He admitted.
I mean, you're beautiful, but I thought you'd be...
Strawberry blonde? I interrupted. A bit shorter, freckled, with deep dimpled cheeks. He stopped laughing, but kept a frozen smile. He didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. I knew this was going to happen, so why did I ever think this time it'd be different? Was that it? I pushed. Was that what you pictured? I didn't even notice that I'd raised my voice. The date was already over, as I started screaming at him. Was that what you goddamned pictured? I had already screwed up. At that point, all I could do was lean into it. Let me explain. This has been the story of my life. People remember me wrong. They picture me wrong. Even my own parents could swear that I used to be strawberry blonde as a kid. There isn't a single picture of me with that hair color. I don't have freckles or deep dimples that make my cheeks puff up. I'm tall, with ink black hair. I got my Mediterranean features from my Italian mom, and that doesn't allow for a lot of cutesy freckles. Still, every person I've met remembers me that way. Sometimes, when we haven't met for a while, they barely recognize me. One of the most common questions I get is whether or not I've done something with my hair. It is really frustrating whenever I have to show my ID, as people just seem hesitant to accept the way I look to be the real me. And yes, I've tried leaning into it. Changing my hair color, even putting on freckles with a makeup pen. It doesn't help. It still just looks kind of off. The weird thing is, sometimes I even trick myself. Some mornings, I don't recognize my own mirror image. For a split second, like a bump in the night, I'm staring at a stranger. I've talked to a therapist about possibly having some sort of depersonalization disorder, but that just isn't it. The problem isn't just me not recognizing myself, it is no one else recognizing me either. This is why I've come to an uncomfortable conclusion. Maybe I was supposed to be someone else. This has been my reality for as long as I can remember. Every date, every party, every picture day at school. Every single time someone asks me what I've done with my hair, or that they like my new makeup, all these little hints and pokes. It adds up over time. Maybe you can see why I'm a bit sensitive, and might lash out at, say, a blind date. But something strange happened that one night. As I stormed off, I took a long walk by the downtown park area. There were a lot of people out and about, but I was all up in my head about overreacting. I thought about ways I could have handled it differently, or that I just had to, I don't know, start taking some kind of medication. Any kind. Whatever kind stops this. That's when I first noticed Daniel. It was this strange feeling. He was standing outside of a taco truck, talking to a group of friends. He didn't seem to stand out in any particular way, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He had this strawberry blonde hair, pale skin, and freckles. Deep dimples that made his cheeks look bigger. He was shorter than his friends, but he just radiated this joy. I can't explain it. It feels like I could probably draw it as a picture, but I can't explain it with words. I had to talk to him. I walked up to him, past his friends, and tapped him on his shoulder. As he turned around, my mind cramped. He wasn't strawberry blonde, freckled, dimpled, or pale. He was Korean, sort of lumpy looking, and in complete shock. So were his friends. Still, he looked at me like he recognized me. There was something there, and neither of us could say what it was. We both laughed. How did you... We said it at the same time, mirroring each other's expressions. We both laughed again.
Did you see...
Again, at the same time. His friends were laughing now as well. Jinx! they yelled at us, "Jinx! Jinx!" I had a long conversation with Daniel that night, and we got to know each other. Turns out we were both born on the same day, but that was where our similarities ended. We'd gone to completely different schools, in different parts of the country, and we both had the same problem. People mistook us for someone else, remembered us wrong. It was even more abrupt for him, not even matching the body shape of the image people thought he was. His friends eventually grew tired of us and left. Daniel and I sat there in the park, talking long into the night. We complained about the way people talked about us, how we never really felt like someone saw us, how this weird, stupid quirk was the one defining thing about what it meant to be us. When we finally parted ways, we friended each other and promised to speak again. We did. A lot. Over the next few weeks, we talked every day. I couldn't help myself still mentally picturing him as someone else, like a brain teaser. I thought about him as this thin, pale man with the same features that people thought I had. It bothered me, but this was exciting. I had never met anyone with the same problem as myself, and all of a sudden, it felt like maybe there wasn't that much wrong with me after all. Then the dreams came. I've always had lively dreams. I'm a very tactile person, so I remember the touch of something before I think of what it looks like. In the night, I could sometimes feel things that I swore I'd never felt before. Holding someone's hand with a hand that isn't mine. Feeling a breeze through someone else's hair. Tasting someone else's breath in your mouth. And the smell of birch trees reaching in through their nose. Like I was a passenger in another body. It would only last short moments and would interrupt whatever other dream I had to the point that I'd wake up. Often in a cold sweat, like my body was scared, even though my mind was calm. Daniel told me he experienced something similar. It was getting more intense. Ever since we met, whatever this problem was had been turned up to 11. We decided to meet and talk about it, for real. We met at the park, not too far from the taco truck where I first saw him. He brought me a milkshake. At first, I didn't even see him. I was expecting the strawberry blonde man that occupied my mind, not whoever this stranger in front of me was. I shook the thought out of my head, thinking he probably felt the same.
We should just go for it,
he said.
Lean into it. See what happens.
What do you mean?
Like we do in the dreams.
I just looked at him. At first, I couldn't connect those thoughts to the person I saw in front of me. The more I thought about it, it felt like I could see through him. Like what he showed wasn't real, that there was a realer part of him that I recognized. The part that we all thought we truly saw, before the spell was broken. We raised our hands at the same time and held them against one another. For a split second, I was somewhere else. A meadow in a birch forest, late springtime. Morning dew was still setting on the blue sunflowers surrounding us. Standing next to someone I felt close to. Someone I felt safe with. A warm hand against mine, like we'd had 1,000 times before. And still, that uneasy feeling. I was still on the park bench. I dropped my milkshake.
Did you see that?
Daniel asked. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I did.
I think I know where that was,
he said.
I've been there.
We got to his car and drove away, following a smaller dirt road out of the city, the one down by the Frog Lake. Instead of turning back onto the main road, he followed a smaller road to the log cabins. We were going off-road, and still, I didn't mind. I felt safe. He knew this place better than me, and I had no idea why or how I would even know that. It was dark outside, but I knew he could get us there either way. We'd been here before. Not this Daniel, and not this me, but the real us. The road came to an abrupt end, and we got out. Daniel held my hand. There was an overgrown path in the forest, leading us deeper into the woods. Pine trees gave way to birch. The space between the trees tickled winds into pushing against us. For a moment, I was back. That springtime morning, hand in hand. Blue sunflowers, a symbol of things to come. We were siblings, and we were pure. Something touched my nose, and I snapped back to reality. A feather. Where did it even come from?
I don't even want to know anymore,
sighed Daniel.
I really don't.
I think we have to, I said.
I know,
He nodded.
but still.
Yeah, still. Someone wanted us to go there. We had been told it'd be fine, that everything would work out. Someone had told us a lie, but I didn't know who or why. There, in the dark of the birch woods, I saw the outlines of sunflowers next to the overgrown path. What we were remembering was old, but no less real. My body was itching, telling me to stop. The milkshake wasn't settling in my stomach. All this had ever been was a mild inconvenience, and now it was literally controlling my life. But at least I wasn't alone, and I could feel something coming. Truth, perhaps. Harsh truth. We knew the meadow was just around the bend, but were no less awed when it came. The sky seemed more open. The sun we were remembering was replaced by a moon, and the white clouds had turned black. This was the place. This is where we'd been. For a moment, I didn't see Daniel. I saw my brother, smiling at me, talking to me, words reaching out to me, like spoken underwater.
I believe.
I didn't even notice him saying it out loud. The real him, the Daniel I'd gotten to know over the past few weeks. What? I said. What did you say?
I don't know.
He admitted.
I don't know why I said that.
What? What else do you want to say? We closed our eyes and spoke from a memory that wasn't our own. Song's eternal, I said. As before, as is now, as will be.
Don't say that.
I opened my eyes. Daniel was holding back tears, his face shaking.
Something bad happens. I feel it. We're doing something bad.
I could feel it too, like something crawling up my throat. I watched another white feather dance in the wind, blowing through the meadow. Daniel nodded at me and took a deep breath.
We have to keep going.
He said, closing his eyes. I know. You're my kin. My soul is true. A sun gone black. A moon gone blue. I ask you, Savior, through and through. If not the three of us, then who? As before, I said.
As is now.
Daniel continued. Then, quiet. There was supposed to be a third person. There had been a third person that day. She knew what would happen to us. We were the next generation to meet him, and no amount of promised eternity could convince her to surrender. Instead, there was a knife. She felled my brother first, then me. A knife bound for our hearts. The song remained unsung, tainting the land and every living thing within. A promise unkept, potential unraveled. A parted cloud, revealing the eye of a vengeful beast. Every bird in the meadow bursting open at the seams, their feathers falling like snow. I was there that day, watching my brother bleed out in the dried grass. The sun eclipsed in black, our spilled blood burrowing into the ground, tainting it for generations. A dark pool puddling deep in the soil, cursing our cowardice. We could have been beautiful, all three of us. The sky had gone dark as the clouds hid the moon. Daniel screamed, only to suddenly stop. A part of me knew what was to come. There was a third person in that meadow, and they just killed Daniel. I couldn't see anything, but I had to run. I tripped on a rotting log and stepped into an anthill. The grass was so dry that I could hear the footsteps of someone approaching. Daniel was wheezing for air and then stopped. I'd heard it once before. As will be,
growled the third voice. As will fucking be.
Had it been another second, they would have gotten me. A memory of their fingertips grabbing my strawberry blonde hair flashed before my mind. The imagined pain of a knife between my shoulder blades shot through me. The blameless coward was making up for past mistakes, but it had cost me my life. A part of me was screaming with joy. A deep, evil part of me. The part that laid dying with the real Daniel. The other part of me was stepping out of an anthill and took off straight into the woods. It was a woman. She wasn't alone. Footsteps in the dark, joyous screams. People running, stumbling, falling and crying in the dark. A dozen of them at least. Some came close enough for me to hear their breaths, but it was pitch black. I figured they'd hear me if I kept running, so instead I laid down. I hid next to a large rock. As the minutes passed, I heard them sweep the area, mistaking each other for me. Someone screamed in pain, another screamed in joy. Someone was silenced by a crunching sound as teeth sunk into flesh. Madmen in the dark, whooping and shouting, begging for my death, for their release, asking me to give up and die. I covered my ears and prayed for dawn. My pulse raced so fast, I could barely hear the individual beats anymore. I held my breath until I almost passed out. It felt like an eternity, but my panicked lizard mind refused to let me out of the moment. I couldn't even count the seconds. I just waited, moment by moment, for the nightmare to end. In an instant, or an eternity, came dawn. It worked. I don't know how, but it did. I had twisted my ankle without even noticing, but come the dawn, I could barely walk. There was still morning dew in the air, and a couple of blue sunflowers looked my way. I found no trace of Daniel's body, and when I called the police, there wasn't much they could do. They did ask me many questions about this supposed third person, and there was plenty of physical evidence for a group of people in the area, but nothing definite. People rarely fish down at Frog Lake anymore, and most people who live in that area are weird loners. This far into the woods, no one can hear you scream. We could be combing the forest for days without finding a speck of blood. The investigation is kept under wraps. No one has talked to me about it, and no one seems to be asking about Daniel anymore. And me? Well, people don't mistake me for that strawberry blonde girl anymore. I think she died in that field next to her brother. Maybe now my life can truly be my own. I think I'll be okay.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a therapist finds himself in over his head when he gets an appointment from a woman with ties to the supernatural. So, do you trust strangers? Because she simply couldn't tell a lie.
When I met Dawn Anderson, I didn't know what to think. She'd booked a counseling session, seemingly out of the blue, and I had no prior information about her. She'd just called into the office, booked a session with my assistant, and popped up. It was a pale November Thursday and my final session for the day. The streetlight outside was in an awkward position, casting long shadows across my office. As I closed the blinds, Dawn shifted in her seat.
I've sought help before,
She admitted.
but I always get the impression that no one really listens.
Therapy is often misunderstood, I said. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It is just maintenance. Like taking a shower or doing your dishes.
I haven't done my dishes in weeks.
She laughed. A darkness fell over her face as she hit herself upside the head repeatedly. Her curly brown hair swayed with each smack.
No,
She said.
I have done my dishes. It's fine. I was exaggerating. I'm not lying.
No worries, I said, sitting down across from her. Let's just have a chat and get to know each other.
That sounds good.
She nodded, calming down.
Thank you.
Dawn was born in '93 as the only child of Morgan and Lita Anderson of Tomskog, Minnesota. Dawn seemed a bit distant when talking about her childhood, as if repeating something she'd rehearsed.
They were very strict and distant. Sometimes they didn't seem like parents at all.
She said.
They had their moments, but there was no warmth.
She would go on to tell stories about how they beat her if they thought she was telling a lie. They once withheld food for 3 days because she didn't tell them what she'd done at school that day. Withholding information, they argued, was a form of lying. They did do nice things at times. They'd often take her swimming down at Frog Lake, and they always made sure her room had plenty of flowers and toys.
It was strange, though.
She admitted.
Going swimming was almost a chore. Twice a week, rain or shine.
When it was too cold to go swimming, they'd give her a mud bath, where she was thoroughly scrubbed.
It became routine, right down to rubbing my gums with it.
It was almost as if Dawn brushed it aside. To her, childhood and parenting wasn't important. She seemed more urgently distressed. And as she recounted her past, she would often stop to make sure she was remembering it right. Apparently, it was very important for her to be as accurate as possible, a remnant from her strict upbringing,
But I'm not here to talk about what used to be.
she said.
I'm here to talk about here and now.
All right, I nodded. Let's talk about it. Who are you today?
I'm a liar.
She sighed.
I've started telling lies.
I waited for her to add something to it, but that was it. That was her big reveal. I leaned back in my chair, clutching my notebook. Does it happen often? I asked.
Not really.
She shrugged.
Every now and then. But it really bothers me.
People tell little lies all the time, Dawn. That doesn't make them bad people.
They don't tell them like I do.
We locked eyes, and I could tell she was sincere. This was something that truly bothered her. For her, this was like admitting a murder.
My lies are different from others.
She continued.
I don't know how to explain it. They change things.
Most lies do, I said. They change our perception. They manipulate,
Yes, but they only manipulate people.
she complained.
Lies don't change what really happens.
What do you mean, Dawn? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She took a deep breath and touched a curly strand of her brown hair for comfort. Meeting my eyes, she spoke in a low tone of voice.
The streetlight outside broke the moment you closed the blinds.
I looked back at the window. Strange how I hadn't noticed it. That awkward light would shine right into my patient's eyes. But it had gone dark. Very observant, I said. I didn't even notice,
That's because I lied.
she said.
It just seems true, but it isn't. That light worked just fine up until I said it didn't.
So you turned it off? I asked. With your lies?
Yes.
She was dead serious. I got up from my chair and peeked out the window. Just as she said, the light was completely broken. It was strange how I hadn't noticed it earlier. But sometimes you can get so caught up in routine that you don't notice the obvious. As I sat back down, she looked defeated.
That's the thing.
She sighed.
It is really hard to convince people that I'm telling the truth. That things change based on my lies.
How would that work exactly? I asked.
I don't know.
Dawn said.
But I didn't have an appointment when I came here today. I lied about it, and then suddenly I had one.
That's not right. I smiled. We had a call in last Tuesday. We got your number and everything. I held up my cell phone, showing her the booking receipt. There it is.
I change things.
Dawn insisted.
What I say changes things. It changes what has happened to accommodate for my lies.
So, when did this start, Dawn?
I think it has always been like this.
She said.
I think my parents knew. Maybe that's why they taught me never to lie.
But you started lying anyway, I said. Can you remember something recent?
There have been a few accidents.
Dawn said.
I used to have a friend who went to veterinary school, and an acquaintance who worked for a bank. We'd been out of touch for a few years, and when we met up, I got them mixed up. I was so convinced that the person who I talked to had gone to veterinary school.
But they didn't?
No. They worked at a bank, I'm sure of it. But now they had both gone to veterinary school. They couldn't have.
Memory is a fragile thing, I said. What is most likely? That you misremembered something, or that your misunderstanding changed events that have already happened?
I know what you want me to answer, but the proof is overwhelming.
So, why did you come here today, Dawn?
I want to stop lying. I never want to tell a lie again.
She breathed a sigh of relief. I nodded, making notes in my notebook. What is stopping you? I asked. What stops you from being completely honest?
Honestly, it is addicting.
She said.
Once you start, it is hard to stop.
How so?
I don't think you understand. The possibilities are staggering. It's like, if you could win the lottery by snapping your fingers, what would stop you from just snapping your fingers all day?
Getting a sore thumb, I suppose.
That's what it feels like to me.
She said.
It's like having a sore thumb in my mind. Every lie I tell is just, it takes something away.
Life is full of little inconveniences, I said. I don't think you should punish yourself for finding ways to cope.
It is not just coping, and it is not just punishing myself. It just happens, like using a muscle too much. It aches. It hurts.
Is that why you hit yourself on the side of your head when we started talking?
Yeah,
She nodded.
it distracts from the pain inside.
Well, some of the things you're describing are impossible, Dawn. You can't change the past. I can see why you would like to, given the way you were raised, but it just can't be done,
I'm gonna stop you right there.
said Dawn, holding up her hand.
Tell me something you did this morning.
All right, I put on fresh white socks.
Then why don't you have any socks on?
As soon as I said it, I felt like an idiot. I'd stepped in a water puddle as I got to work and didn't have a spare pair with me. My wet socks were still hanging on the bathroom radiator. You didn't let me finish, I smiled. I do have them, just not on me right now.
No, see? It changes. It changes, and you just adapt to it.
She knocked herself on the side of her head, clenching her eyes shut. Sparkles of sweat ran down her forehead. Dawn, look at it from my point of view. What is more likely? That you saw I wasn't wearing socks and used that information, or that you can change the very, very fabric of events?
I know how it sounds, but that's what happens. And as long as it is just small things, all I get is a crackle in the back of my head. But as soon as I start telling big lies, it feels like I'm being ripped apart.
With big lies, do you mean something we can't ignore? Do you have any examples?
The first lie I ever told.
She nodded.
I had this dream of sunflowers when I was a kid. A whole field of them, all swaying in the wind. When I got to school, I drew them on a piece of paper. The yellow crayon was taken, so instead I colored them blue.
That sounds lovely.
It was, until I got home. Our entire backyard was this large field of blue sunflowers. My parents, of course, acted like it had always been there.
But it hadn't been.
No, Mom had a garden there. She grew tomatoes. We still had some in the fridge, but she insisted they were store-bought.
So they never found out you were lying?
Not at first, but I felt so bad that I admitted it. That's when I didn't get to eat for 3 days. They said it was because I hadn't told them about the drawing soon enough.
Well, I think you will find it difficult to convince me this is true, Dawn. But that is irrelevant. It is true to you, and that's what is most important. If you want to stop lying, there are ways to do so. But I'd like to get to the root of the problem and see where this comes from.
It bothers me that you don't believe me.
I'm sorry to hear that, Dawn. But what you're describing is simply impossible.
It bothers me greatly.
We looked at one another. Dawn wasn't budging, but neither was I.
How come you've pretended to write all this time when your pen has run out of ink?
It's just to put the patient at ease, I smiled, like a doctor with a stethoscope. It is expected, but not always practical.
The last 40 pages you've written is just the text, "Listen to Dawn," over and over.
Of course it is, I chuckled. That's how I practice my cursive.
And you don't see anything odd about this? Nothing at all?
Coincidences happen, but all that you point out are things I can clearly remember. I can't be surprised by a stated fact.
But that's just... ugh.
Dawn wiped her nose as a single drop of blood dripped out. I offered her a napkin, but she refused. This was clearly affecting her.
I've talked to 8 other people about this.
She said.
No matter what, they keep denying me. No matter what absurd proof I present, all they do is rationalize it and call me schizophrenic.
I don't think you are, Dawn. I think you have a trauma that...
It is not a fucking trauma.
Dawn stood up, pacing back and forth. She was getting agitated. I stood up next to her, carefully putting my hand on her shoulder. Can I get you any coffee, tea?
You're married, right?
She asked.
Do you love your wife?
Of course, with all my heart.
Do you, though? Do you really, really love her?
Undoubtedly. Dawn shook her head.
Can you feel right now the happiness she brings to your life?
Yes, but what...
Then why are you considering divorcing her?
It was like the twist of a knife in my chest. It was such an alien thought, but of course, I had been considering it for a long time. I couldn't think of a reason at the top of my head, and the way it made me feel was just awful. Patricia and I had had our ups and downs over the years, but we'd always grown stronger because of it. Sure, we'd hit a rough patch in the past few weeks, but...
You said you loved her.
Said Dawn.
You said you were happily married, then something changed.
Not changed as much as... I scratched my head. I felt strange, like something had flipped my world upside down. 2 drops of blood pushed themselves out of Dawn's eyes, little red tears.
You have to believe me.
Stand Dawn.
Please believe me.
I'm trying, but...
Fine, let's go.
growled Dawn.
Let's fucking go.
She put on her jacket and pushed me down into my chair. She was getting aggressive, and I considered calling for security. Then, as soon as I sat down, she sat down across from me. She took a hold of my hand and didn't let go.
Remember last night when you stabbed your wife?
She asked. How the fuck did she know? My mouth opened wide like a fucking trout as my mind started to race. There'd been no one else there. It had been an accident, a fluke. We had talked about our thoughts of a divorce, but it was nothing serious. Then it just escalated.
You buried her in the backyard. Your hands still smell like dirt. What do you think about that?
She continued. No, you can't. I could feel my body shutting down. Some sort of shock factor coursing through my brain. My hands started shaking, my eyes started tearing. I remembered it all so vividly. Patricia's soft hands covered by dirt, shovel after shovel. The way I scrubbed my hands, but couldn't get rid of the smell. I still had dirt under my fingernails. It had happened, but I'd tried to push it away. To pretend like nothing, an alibi.
Why would you do that? You loved her, didn't you?
I did. I'd loved Patricia with every bone of my being.
And yet you kept her head in a plastic wrap in the back of your goddamn freezer.
Of course. I couldn't let her go. I broke down. I cried like a fucking baby. There was no way Dawn could have known this. I had barely even admitted it to myself. Compartmentalizing. There were 1,000 little reasons leading up to what I'd done. But to have it all splayed out like this in front of me, it was too much. My world was crumbling. My peace of mind had already rested on the knife's edge, ready to tip me over the side, but now I felt like I was free-falling. A pale hand feeding the worms outside. A bathroom smelling of chlorine and bleach. A perfectly good hacksaw that I couldn't bear to look at ever again. Green eyes staring at me through thin plastic, asking me why. I threw myself out of the chair, enraged. She couldn't know. Dawn were suddenly bleeding out of her mouth, eyes, and nose. Still, she smiled.
Every time.
She laughed.
Why does no one ever listen?
You've said enough.
Really?
Dawn pushed me away, breaking a leg of the table between us. As I landed on my back, she held me down with a hat rack.
You drowned your daughter in a well. You ran over your mother with your car. You've killed 3 hitchhikers using the loaded rifle in the trunk of your car.
I just screamed as the memories came flooding back to me. It was true. All of it. How the fuck did she know? It had been years. I'd covered my tracks so well. I got a hold of her foot and dragged her down to the floor next to me. I could barely see her in between my teary eyes, but I had to do something. I had to stop the pain. I had to end her. I tried to get my hands around her neck, but she resisted. She was stronger than I thought.
Then again,
She coughed as one of my hands touched her neck.
all I've said today has been a lie, hasn't it?
My mind went completely blank. As my eyes lost focus, I saw Dawn getting up. Her eyes were completely red swollen with blood. She kept beating the side of her head with the palm of her hand, coughing all the while. I'd probably given her a bruise. It was, but
It takes a while to rationalize the bigger stuff.
she said
Give it some time.
I didn't do any of that. I didn't.
Of course not. All I said was a lie.
But why, how,
I think that's enough.
sighed Dawn.
I can't say I'm surprised. No one ever believes me. Just try to remember me as Dawn Anderson, a young human woman, and not the way you've truly seen me.
As she left the office, I was still sitting on the floor. I couldn't even understand why. I had no reason to be upset or attack her. Sure, she'd been provoking me with mental images of harm coming to my family, but to attack her like that, it was insanity. Stress-induced hysteria or something. I sat alone in my office, feeling the pale light of the streetlight outside warm the back of my neck. I don't know what to believe. And I don't know if I will eventually rationalize all of this to some insane degree. but I know that it shook me to my core. There was something about Dawn that I had never seen in another patient. And to some degree, I believe she knows something impossible. And when I went home to open my freezer that night, I was genuinely scared to see something look back at me, even though Patricia was sleeping soundly in the other room. But the shock of hearing what Dawn had said, and the images it conjured in my mind, it remained. The untouched spot in my backyard, the hacksaw in the garage. It was still there, unused. I held Patricia tight that night as I dreamt of murder, as if it had really happened, if only for a while. I haven't seen a snowplow in 3 days. The road at the end of the driveway is gone, just a smooth, white scar cutting through the tree line. It is beautiful in that way that deadly things often are. But the silence is the worst part. The snow muffles everything, cars, birds, the wind, until the only thing you can hear is the blood rushing in your own ears. I thought being home alone during a blizzard would be cozy. Fireplace, whiskey, old books. But about an hour ago, the motion sensor light on the back patio flickered on. I froze, my glass halfway to my mouth. I told myself it was a deer, maybe a stray dog looking for warmth. But when I walked to the sliding glass door and cupped my hands against the cold pane, there was nothing there. Just the empty yard and the snow falling straight down like static. I waited for the light to click off. It didn't. 10 minutes later, I saw him. He was standing at the very edge of the woods, right where the light fades into the black. He wasn't dressed for this weather. No coat, no hat, just a flannel shirt and jeans, soaked through and frozen stiff. He wasn't shivering. He was just standing, facing the house. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I yelled through the glass, asking what he wanted, telling him I had a gun, even though I don't. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just took one step forward into the light. And that's when I saw his face. It was wrong. It was smooth, too smooth, like wet clay that hadn't quite set yet. And he was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was just a wide, impossible gash, showing too many teeth. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the windows. I ran to the kitchen to find my phone, but the signal was dead, buried under 6 feet of atmospheric pressure. When I went back to the living room, he was closer. He had covered 50 yards in seconds without leaving a single footprint in the pristine snow. He was pressing his face against the glass now. His breath didn't fog the window. He was just staring at me with those wide, unblinking eyes, tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Not a frantic knock. A polite, rhythmic tapping. Like he was keeping time to a song only he could hear. I backed away, tripping over the rug, and scrambled backward until my back hit the hallway wall. The power cut out exactly at midnight. The hum of the refrigerator died, plunging the house into a heavy, suffocating darkness. The only light came from the dying embers in the fireplace, casting long, twisting shadows across the floor. I held my breath, listening. The tapping had stopped. For a moment I thought maybe he had gone. Maybe the cold had finally taken him. But then I heard it. The sound of the front door handle turning, jiggle, click. It was locked. I knew it was locked. But then I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice water. From the other side of the door, a voice spoke. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was my voice. Perfect pitch, perfect cadence. It whispered, "It's cold out here. Let me in. I promise I won't bite." And then, The deadbolt slid open with a sharp, metal clack. The heavy oak door didn't slam open. It drifted inward with a slow, agonizing creak that seemed to last for a lifetime. I didn't stay to see it swing wide. I scrambled backward into the kitchen, my socks slipping on the hardwood, and shoved myself into the narrow pantry, pulling the door shut until only a sliver of the dark hallway was visible. The air in the house changed instantly. It wasn't just the cold, it was the smell. It smelled like wet earth and old, stagnant ice. And then came the footsteps. They didn't sound like boots on wood. They sounded like wet meat being slapped against the floor. Slap, drag, slap, drag. He was inside. He was standing in the foyer, right where I had stood just moments ago, probably looking at the wet prints I'd left behind. My own voice called out again, vibrating from a throat that shouldn't exist. "I can smell the whiskey," the voice said, sounding so much like me it made my stomach turn. "It's a good year. You always had, expensive taste." I held my breath until my lungs burned, watching through the crack in the pantry door. A shadow blocked the light from the fireplace. He moved into the kitchen, his silhouette jerky and wrong, like a film with missing frames. When he passed through the faint orange glow of the embers, I saw his profile. His head was tilted at a 90-degree angle, resting almost flat against his shoulder. Yet he walked as if he were perfectly upright. His skin looked like shrink-wrapped plastic, pulled too tight over a skull that was slightly too large. He didn't look for me in the cabinets or under the table. He went straight to the refrigerator. He opened it, the light spilling across the floor, and he just stared at the food. He picked up a carton of milk, sniffed it, and then began to pour it onto the floor, watching the white liquid spread across the dark tile with a look of intense, clinical curiosity. "The power's out," he whispered, still using my voice. But now it was distorted, like a record playing at the wrong speed. "Everything is going to spoil. You, me, the house. We're all going to turn sour in the dark." He dropped the carton and turned toward the pantry. I pulled back, pressing my spine against the shelves of canned goods, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. I heard him move closer. The slap drag sound stopped, right outside the pantry door. I could hear him breathing. It was a wet, rattling sound, like air being pushed through a straw. Then the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. On the wooden door, just inches from my face. "I know you're in there," he said. "I can hear your heart. It's so loud. It's the only thing in this house that's still warm. Why won't you share it?" The door handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately. I grabbed a heavy can of peaches, ready to swing, ready to die fighting. But the door didn't open. Instead, I heard the sound of something tearing, like wet fabric being ripped apart. I peeked through the crack one last time and saw the most horrific thing of all. He wasn't trying to get in. He was changing. His skin was bubbling, shifting, melting. The smooth, clay-like features were sharpening into a nose, a chin, a jawline. My nose, my chin, my jawline. He was growing hair, dark, messy hair, just like mine. He reached up with hands that were finally becoming human and straightened his head until it clicked into place. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, adjusted his collar, and practiced a smile. Not the wide, horrific gash from before, but my smile, the one I use for photos, the one I use when I'm nervous. He turned away from the pantry and walked toward the living room, his footsteps now sounding perfectly normal. He sat down in my favorite armchair, picked up my book, and began to read by the light of the dying fire. I am still here. I am still in the pantry. The sun is starting to come up, and I can hear a snowplow in the distance, finally clearing the road. I hear my neighbor's truck pull into the driveway. I hear him knock on the front door, calling out my name to see if I'm okay after the storm. And I hear the thing in the living room stand up, walk to the door, and answer it. "I'm fine, Bill," it says, perfectly cheery, perfectly human. "Just a bit of a cold night. Come on in. I'll put the coffee on." I want to scream, but I know if I make a sound, the me on the other side of the door will stop smiling. And I don't think Bill is ever going to leave this house. They don't tell you about the cabin fever in the recruitment brochures for the National Park Service. They talk about the majesty of the pines, the crisp mountain air, and the noble duty of protecting the wilderness. But they don't mention what happens when a level 5 blizzard pins you inside a 12 by 12 fire lookout tower for 10 days straight. The Blackwood Ridge is beautiful in the summer, but in February, it's a graveyard of ice. My only contact with the outside world is a crackling shortwave radio and the occasional strobe of a distant plow on the valley floor, 3,000 feet below. I've spent the last 48 hours watching the snow climb the legs of this tower. It's reached the catwalk now. I'm not just isolated, I'm entombed. And that's when I saw the first set of tracks. I was clearing the frost from the north-facing window when I saw them. Large, heavy imprints in the fresh powder, circling the base of the tower. At first I thought bear, but the gait was all wrong. The steps were too far apart, perfectly bipedal and deep, as if whatever made them weighed 500 pounds. They didn't lead toward the forest, and they didn't lead away. They just circled, around and around, like a predator pacing a cage. I grabbed my binoculars, my breath hitching in my throat, and followed the trail. The tracks ended abruptly at the base of the steel ladder. There were no return prints. Whatever had made them was either still directly beneath me, or it had started to climb. The radio crackled to life then, spitting out a burst of static that sounded like a scream. I fumbled for the handset, desperate for the voice of the dispatcher at the base station. But it wasn't the dispatcher. It was a recording of my own voice from the logs I'd submitted 2 hours ago. All quiet on Blackwood, my voice whispered through the speaker. Visibility near 0. No signs of activity. But the recording didn't stop there. It began to distort, the pitch dropping into a low, guttural growl. Visibility 0, it repeated. No signs of life. I slammed the power switch on the radio, but the voice kept going, now coming from the vents in the floor. It sounded like something was trying to learn how to speak by chewing on my words. Then came the scratching. It didn't start at the door. It started under the floorboards, right beneath my feet. A slow, rhythmic scraping of bone against metal. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Something was hanging onto the underside of the lookout cabin, suspended 300 feet in the air in the middle of a gale. I retreated to the center of the room, clutching my flare gun, my eyes locked on the trapdoor in the floor. The scratching stopped. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only the howl of the wind. Then, a soft, polite knock at the window. I turned, my heart stopping in my chest. A face was pressed against the triple-paned glass. It had no skin, just a wet, gray musculature stretched over a human-shaped skull. It didn't have a nose or ears. It just had eyes. Vibrant, intelligent, human eyes. that looked exactly like mine. It didn't try to break the glass, it just watched me, its mouth splitting open to reveal rows of needle-thin teeth. It raised a hand, a long, spindly thing with too many joints, and began to mimic my movements. When I raised the flare gun, it raised a finger. When I backed away, it leaned forward. It wasn't just watching me, it was downloading me. I realized then that the blizzard wasn't the disaster. The blizzard was the cover. This thing had been waiting for the world to turn white so it could step into my life without anyone noticing the swap. The radio clicked back on, and this time, the voice was perfect. It was me. "Dispatch, this is Lookout 4, the voice said, sounding cheerful and calm. "The storm is breaking. I'm coming down now. Send the transport to the trailhead." The thing at the window winked at me, then let go, vanishing into the white abyss below. I am still up here. I am screaming into a dead radio. And somewhere down there in the snow, I am walking home. This is part 2 of The Cold Watch. It continues the descent into psychological terror as the narrator tries to reclaim his life from the thing that stole his voice. This script is formatted for the Chris voice in 11 Labs. Deep, breathless, and increasingly desperate. The Cold Watch, Part 2. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. I stood in the center of that vibrating tower, clutching a flare gun that felt like a toy against the primordial hunger I'd just witnessed. The radio was dead again, truly dead this time. But the air still tasted like that thing. It smelled like ozone and wet copper. I knew I couldn't stay. If I stayed, I was just a frozen meal waiting for the spring thaw. I had to get down. I had to reach the trailhead before that. That version of me climbed into the transport truck. I shoved my feet into my boots, grabbed my heavy parka, and kicked open the trapdoor. The wind hit me like a physical blow, a wall of white ice that tried to shove me back into the safety of my coffin. I gripped the frozen metal rungs of the ladder, my breath coming in ragged silver plumes, and began to climb down into the abyss. Every inch was a battle. The metal was so cold, it felt like it was biting through my gloves, trying to fuse my skin to the structure. Halfway down, the wind died for a split second and I heard it. A laugh. My laugh. It wasn't coming from below. It was coming from the air around me, swirling in the snowflakes. "You're late," the voice whispered, vibrating in my very teeth. "They're already here. They like the new you. He's much more cooperative." I looked down, my eyes stinging from the frost, and saw the faint, rhythmic pulse of amber strobe lights through the trees. The transport. It was at the trailhead, half a mile away. I dropped the last 10 feet into the snow, my knees buckling, and began to run. Or at least, I tried to. In 4 feet of powder, running is just a slow-motion crawl toward your own funeral. I reached the tree line, my lungs burning with every gasp of sub-zero air. The woods were different now. The pines didn't look like trees. They looked like jagged teeth reaching out of the earth. And then I saw the prints again. Not just one set, dozens. They were everywhere, circling the trees, leading toward the road, crisscrossing in a frantic, chaotic dance. And in the center of the path, I found it. A pile of clothes. A Park Service uniform, torn to shreds, but not by claws. It looked like it had been shed, like a snake's skin. I picked up the name tag. It was mine. But it wasn't just my name. The photo on the ID was shifting. As I watched, the face in the plastic began to melt, the eyes sliding down the cheeks, the mouth stretching into that horrific needle-toothed grin I'd seen at the window. I burst through the final line of trees just as the heavy transport truck was idling by the gate. The headlights were blinding, 2 twin suns in the white dark. I saw him. I saw me. He was standing by the passenger door, chatting with Miller, the head ranger. He was leaning against the hood, laughing, throwing his head back in that way I do when I'm trying to be charming. Miller was smiling back, handing him a thermos of coffee. I tried to scream. I opened my mouth to shout Miller's name, to warn him, to tell him that the thing next to him was a hollow shell made of winter and spite, but no sound came out. My throat felt like it was filled with dry sand. I clutched my throat, gasping, realizing the finality of the theft. He hadn't just mimicked my voice. He had taken it. He had pulled the sound right out of my vocal cords and left me with nothing but the whistle of the wind. The thing that looked like me stopped laughing. It turned its head, slowly, too far, just like before, and looked directly at the spot where I was shivering in the shadows. It didn't look scared. It didn't look caught. It just smiled. That perfect human smile that I'd practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. It raised a hand and pointed at me. Miller turned, squinting into the dark, his hand dropping to the holster at his hip. "Who's there?" Miller shouted, his voice tight with suspicion. I stepped into the light, my hands raised, my mouth opening and closing in a silent, pathetic plea. But Miller didn't see his friend. He didn't see a man in distress. He saw a shivering, frost-covered shape with no voice, lurking in the woods like a predator. "Stay back," Miller yelled, drawing his weapon. The thing that stole my life stepped up beside him, putting a comforting hand on Miller's shoulder. "Careful, Miller," it said in my perfect, warm voice. "The storm does strange things to the animals up here. Sometimes they forget they're supposed to be afraid of us." The truck door slammed shut. The engine roared. And as they drove away into the white, I watched my own face looking back at me through the rear window, waving goodbye. The parents didn't seem worried about the weather. They offered me $800 to stay the night while they drove to a private gala 3 towns over, even as the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise and the first flakes began to stick. Mrs. Sterling just squeezed my hand, her palms strangely cold, and pointed toward the nursery at the top of the stairs. "Don't wake Leo," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the ceiling. "He's a light sleeper, and he doesn't like to be interrupted when he's dreaming." They left before I could even ask for the Wi-Fi password, their taillights vanishing into the white wall of the blizzard within seconds. Now it's just me, the ticking of a grandfather clock that seems to be slowing down, and the wind howling like a wounded animal against the siding. I checked on Leo an hour ago. He's 4 years old, but he was sitting perfectly upright in his crib, staring at the wall in total darkness. He didn't turn when I opened the door. He just said, "The snow is hiding the exits, Sarah. Can you feel it?" I haven't been back upstairs since. The power flickered and died at 10 p.m., leaving me with nothing but a half-melted vanilla candle and the glow of my dying phone. That's when the sound started. Not from outside, but from the nursery. Thump, drag, thump. It sounded like Leo was moving furniture, but he's barely 30 pounds. I crept up the stairs, the wood groaning under my feet like it was in pain. When I reached the landing, the nursery door was wide open. The room was freezing, colder than the outside air. Leo wasn't in his crib. He was standing by the window, his silhouette stretched long and jagged against the frosted glass. I called his name, my voice trembling, and he turned around. But it wasn't a 4-year-old boy. His limbs were too long, his elbows bending at impossible angles, and his face was the stuff of nightmares. His eyes were where his mouth should be, and a wide weeping slit was opened across his forehead, blinking at me with a wet, human iris. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had been filled with liquid nitrogen. The thing that was wearing Leo's pajamas took a step toward me, its movements twitchy and unnatural, like a stop-motion puppet. "The parents aren't coming back, Sarah," it said, and the voice was a sickening mosaic of a child's giggle and a grown man's roar. "They didn't go to a gala. They went to the cellar. They've been in the cellar for a long, long time. They just needed someone to stay with me until the transition was complete. Someone fresh." It tilted its head, and I saw the skin on its neck begin to ripple and tear, revealing a gray, oily substance underneath. It wasn't just a demon, it was a parasite, and it was outgrowing its host. I backed away, stumbling toward the stairs, but the floor seemed to stretch, making the hallway a mile long. The thing, Leo, didn't run. It just crawled onto the ceiling, its fingers clicking against the plaster like insect legs. Click-clack, click-clack. I made it to the kitchen and grabbed the heavy iron bolt on the cellar door, thinking I could hide. But then I remembered what it said. I smelled it then. The scent of rotting meat and old copper coming from behind the wood. I pressed my ear to the door and heard a faint, rhythmic scratching from the other side. "Sarah," a voice whispered from the dark below. It was Mrs. Sterling. "Is that you? Please, don't let him see you cry. He feeds on the salt." The candle on the counter hissed and went out. In the total darkness of the kitchen, I felt a small, cold hand slip into mine. It felt like a child's hand, soft and delicate, but the grip was like a steel vise. I could hear the wet, blinking sound of that forehead eye right next to my ear. "It's okay, Sarah," the thing whispered, its breath smelling of winter and graves. "You don't need to see to be a part of the family. Just hold still. The first part only stings for a second." I can feel the skin on my own face starting to itch now. I can feel my jaw shifting, my teeth lengthening, my eyes sliding down my cheeks. The snow is still falling. The house is silent. And I think I'm starting to like the dark. I woke up on the cellar floor, but the floor didn't feel like wood or stone. It felt soft, like breathing leather. The darkness down here isn't empty. It's thick, like a liquid that fills your throat and ears until you forget what the sun looks like. I tried to touch my face, but my fingers felt wrong, too long, too thin, with extra knuckles that clicked like dry twigs. That was when I heard the whispering again. It wasn't just Mrs. Sterling. There were dozens of voices, a chorus of hushed, wet sounds coming from the corners of the basement. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen was shattered, emitting only a faint, flickering blue light. In that stuttering glow, I saw them. The Sterlings weren't tied up. They weren't even crying. They were hanging from the ceiling beams by thin, silver threads of saliva, their bodies stretched out like pulled taffy. Their faces were inverted. The Thatcher effect in the flesh. Their eyes were beneath their chins, their mouths sitting where their brows should be, twitching in a silent, rhythmic pulse. They weren't victims anymore. They were the cocoons. "You're awake just in time, Sarah." The voice of the thing called Leo drifted down from the top of the stairs. I looked up and saw him, or what was left of him. He was no longer a child. He was a pillar of gray, translucent flesh, his many eyes blinking in unison as he descended the stairs without making a sound. The $800. It wasn't for the sitting. It was for the skin. It's so hard to find skin that hasn't been scarred by life yet. Yours is perfect. So elastic. So ready to be reshaped. I tried to crawl away, but the basement floor rippled beneath me, dragging me back toward the center of the room. I looked at my reflection in a puddle of snow melt on the floor and screamed, but the sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was a high-pitched digital whistle. My eyes had migrated to my neck. My nose was a jagged hole in my cheek. I was becoming a masterpiece of the wrong. The things on the ceiling began to hatch. I watched as Mrs. Sterling's face split open down the middle, and something sleek and pale stepped out of the husk of her body. It looked exactly like her, but the proportions were just slightly off. The arms an inch too long, the smile a fraction too wide. It walked over to me and knelt down, stroking my hair with a hand that felt like cold marble. "Don't be afraid, Sarah," the new Mrs. Sterling said, her voice sounding like a beautiful melody played on a broken piano. "We're going to the gala now, the real gala, the one where we don't have to hide what we are, and you're coming with us. We just need to wait for the snow to stop so the next girl can find the house." I realized then that the blizzard wasn't a storm at all. It was a veil, a hunting ground. The Sterlings had been doing this for decades, luring in the young and the lonely with the promise of easy money, only to use them as raw material for their family. I looked at Leo, who was now fitting himself into a new set of clothes, my clothes. He was shrinking, his flesh folding and tucking itself until he looked exactly like me. He put on my coat. He picked up my shattered phone. He even mimicked the way I bite my lip when I'm nervous. He looked at the things hanging from the ceiling and nodded. "The snow is clearing," he said in my voice. "The plow is coming. I'll go out and meet the delivery driver. We're going to need more supplies for the winter." They left me there, pinned to the floor as my bones continued to break and reset into their new, horrific geometry. I am the new Mrs. Sterling now. Or at least, I will be once the skin finishes setting. I can hear a car pulling into the driveway. I can hear the crunch of boots on the fresh powder. I can hear the doorbell ring, a cheerful, mundane sound that cuts through the silence of the house. And then I hear my own voice, bright, warm, and perfectly human, answer the door. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," the voice says. "The weather's just dreadful, isn't it? Come on in. Leo's just finishing his dinner. I've got the $800 right here on the counter for you." I want to warn her. I want to tell her to run into the white and never look back. But all I can do is blink my eyes from the hollow of my throat and wait for the basement door to open.